all-electric bakery. And I remember my mother giving me a dime, and she would say, go over to the baker shop and get a loaf of bread. So we got some for supper, and we can have some for sandwiches for tomorrow. And she gave me a dime. I went and got a long loaf of sandwich bread, and she said, and be sure to bring me the change back. Well, the change was 2 pennies. But
times have changed, right?
They have really changed as far as people with money. Now, if they got a penny, they'll probably throw it away because they don't want to carry all that weight around in your pocket. Well, on Sunday, December the 7th, my mother's youngest sister and my mother and my sister, myself, and my 2 younger brothers, we went to Effingham to a funeral home. And we went up there. They had a relative who lived up there that passed away, and we went up to visit the family. And we came back, and that was before we didn't have no radio in the car at that time. And my aunt drove, and when we walked in the house, her house, my aunt's house, she lived out on East B Street. Why, her husband was there. And he says, we all got in, and even my father was with us also. And he said, well, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, so it looks like we're going to be at war. And my dad says, I could see that coming. And I often wondered, what did he know that average person didn't realize that was happening? But that was...
What was life like during the war for you?
Well, I don't really know. At the first part of the war, the United States took a lot of losses. We had to go back and reclaim all of those islands in the Pacific. And I remember reading about and seeing about at the movie theaters, why they'd show that movie tone news, and you'd see all these ships out in the ocean, and these submarines come up and they'd torpedo them. But
so your dad didn't go into the service?
My father was in World War I. My father was in France, and he was a medic. And he also had an Army trench pick. And I also had that on display out at the Belleville Centennial in 2015 or 14, whenever it was. And I've since given that to my sister's oldest son. I said, here, this is something here from your grandfather. Because on the handle, in the wood handle, and the blade at the top were very easily taken apart. All you had to do is just tap the bottom of the handle, and it would come loose from the head. You take it out, and the same way you put it all back together if you want to use it. And all you had to do is just tap it on something hard, and that would wedge in there. And it had a U.S. on the tongue of the pick, as well as a U.S. was carved in the wood handle. So I said, you don't have anything. I said, here, I'll give you this. So I had it, and my son didn't want it. He said, and we've had it around the house. They had all these years, and I just, within the last 3 years, I've given that to him. I've given a lot of things to my other nieces and nephews before we moved. So, well, my wife was 1 year ahead of me in high school. She graduated in 43. I graduated in 1944. And I went off and we went to the service. In January of 45, I was called up to active duty in the Air Force. And she had gone to Washington University, and she was at Washington U for 2 years. And then she laid out 2 years because she belonged to the Masonic affiliated Rainbow for Girls. And she had a job up in Hartford, Connecticut at the Institute of Living. And the Institute of Living was a place where the filthy rich, criminally insane people would be put. Instead of being sent to prison, they would put them in an insane asylum, and that's where she worked. And she told me many stories about that up there. And then she came back, and she went to work at the Dutch Girl, and that's which is now Fisher's, where I met her. And we started dating, and within about 2 years, we were married then. We got married on the 28th of June at 7 p.m. in St. Paul's Church, and the temperature that evening at 7 o'clock was 107 degrees with no air conditioning. And we were kneeling there taking our vows, and she looked over at me and she thought, why is he crying? He should be happy we're getting married. And then she looked a little bit more, and she could see the beads of sweat just popping out of my face and running on, and it looked just like I was there crying. And so it wasn't until many years later that she told me this tale. I got one son, and he's just turned 63. He says, 2 more years, Dad, I'm going to retire, then we're going to do some traveling. So let's hope it works out anyway.
Where do you want to travel?
Well, we want to go back to Europe. In fact, we're looking at books right now. We wanted to go in July, but that cruise is already booked up solid. They don't even have it listed anymore. But I want to go across the European continental divide, fly into Amsterdam and get on a riverboat, and you'll go up the Rhine River to the Main, and you go up the Main River to the canals, and then the lakes, and you go up to over 1,300 feet, and then you come down on the other side of the divide, and you're on the Danube, and you go down as far as either Vienna or Budapest. So I don't know how far we're going to go yet, but that's what we're hoping. And with that one, we're looking at the calendar, and with his vacation, he's trying to figure out when we can go, but it probably be sometime in early September. Well, I worked for a Millstock Milling Company. I worked for Vickers Incorporated in St. Louis as we were testing components that were going into different electrical boxes that they were making for different control of equipment. And then finally I started to work I got a job at Union Electric. I started at Union Electric on the 22nd day of December of 1952. That was just about, that was 6-7 months after we were married. And I worked there for 36 years before I retired. And after I started working at Union Electric, the money was better. That was in the 50s then. And we built a house in West Belleville. And my wife had wanting to go to auction sales. And one of the first things that she bought at an auction was an old platform scale that they have in stores with a scoop on it. And under that scoop was a little ring. And the ring was on the opposite side. And it would hold the 2 pound, the 1 pound, the 8 ounce, the 4 ounce, the 2 ounce, and 1 ounce. And I'll tell you, you get a start weighing it off, why, you can weigh up to 3 pounds and 15 ounces. But she liked to go to these country auctions. We would go east into Washington County because her parents were originally from around Oakville and Eddyville. Her father was a railroad conductor for a railroad station telegrapher for the L&N Railroad for 57 years before he retired. And so she knew that country out there, and she knew a lot of people out in Oakville and Eddyville. And we went to different sales, and we picked up some antiques, and I've got a couple of them I'll show you. My first car was a Ford, two-door Ford coupe like. And finally, I was having trouble with it. It was time to get rid of it. Then I bought a Plymouth, and I had trouble with it after a few years. Finally, one day she says, "Oh, one of her uncles died, and they've got his car up for sale." And I said, "How many miles do they have on it?" And she says, "Oh, something like only 30 or 40,000." So we were able to buy it, and that lasted us. We took a trip in that to Boston to visit one of my mother's sisters up there, and it made it up there and back without any problems.
Remember how much a tank of gas cost?
I don't remember what a tank of gas cost, but I remember my youngest, my mother's youngest sister, her husband ran a filling station where Paulie Junkyard is now on the Freeburg Road. And he sold gas there back in the 30s at $8, eight gallon for $1. That's a big difference than $1.50 a gallon we're paying today. So, well, I like German chocolate.
Favorite ice cream?
Oh, I like that coffee ice cream that Breyers make. My wife had a bookcase full when we built our house in Covered Bridge in 1980. Why, she had to have a bookcase put in her living room for all of her books. And when we sold that house, we had to move. I gave 27 boxes of books with each box had about, 10 to 12 books in it to the Memorial Hospital Book Fair. And they were all put up for sale at the book fair. But I know she had read all the books, and I just didn't have them. There was a few books I held it back. I still got them, been reading on. And I had some books that told the basics of carpentry. And I have a nephew down in Redbud who does a lot of woodworking. And I asked him one day, I said, "Hey, would you want to look at some of the books of how these carpenters," and they'd explain in detail how they would calculate an oval circle and how far and the radius. And it was just astounding how the people from those times could figure out how to do things. I think either spring or fall. I'm not too happy with the intense heat in the summer and the cold in the winter. Well, not really any of them. I enjoy them all. Well, we go to Fisher's because I knew Ardell Fisher, who founded that. And we go out there usually Sunday mornings for breakfast or brunch, whatever you want to call it. And we also like to go out to the Red Lobster.
What about your favorite color?
Well, I don't know if I really have a favorite color or not. I like them all. Reds and blues. I guess that was the day we got married. Well, when I